The fog never really left the Arklay Mountains. Long after the fires died and the mansion collapsed into rubble, something remained in those woods, a presence that defied simple explanation, a wrongness that seeped into the soil and never quite washed away. The townsfolk who survived those first attacks in May 1998 spoke of sounds in the dark, of movement glimpsed between trees that stood too still. They described a feeling, an instinct that whispered of danger even when nothing visible threatened. The Arklay region had become a wound in the world, and like all wounds left untreated, it festered. This is where Resident Evil began, in the space between what we can see and what we cannot explain. The series built its foundation on mysteries that refuse resolution, on questions that generate only more questions when examined too closely. These aren't puzzles designed for solving. They're glimpses into a reality where human ambition collided with forces beyond comprehension, where the pursuit of perfection through science created only new forms of nightmare. The darkest mysteries in Resident Evil aren't about zombies or monsters. They're about the people who made them, the choices that led to catastrophe, and the secrets that survived when everything else burned. Tonight we descend into those mysteries, not to solve them, but to understand what makes them endure. Some truths resist illumination. Some stories are meant to be experienced in the half-light, where certainty dissolves and only atmosphere remains. The Architect's Trap. George Trevor was a brilliant man who designed his own tomb without knowing it. In 1962, he received the commission of a lifetime. Lord Oswell E. Spencer wanted a mansion built in the remote Arklay Mountains northwest of Raccoon City. The specifications were unusual. Spencer requested elaborate puzzle mechanisms, hidden passages that led to dead ends, rooms that transformed into death traps at the pull of a lever. Trevor, an accomplished New York architect with a reputation for incorporating theatrical elements into his designs, embraced the challenge. He saw it as an opportunity to create something that transcended mere architecture, a structure that would test and challenge anyone who entered. The mansion took 5 years to complete. Trevor poured his genius into every corridor, every concealed door, every trick of perspective that made hallways seem longer or rooms appear where none should exist. He designed a shotgun trap that would crush anyone who removed the weapon from its wall mount. He created an art gallery where paintings held the keys to progression, their subjects arranged from youngest to oldest, in a sequence that would take genuine insight to decipher. The dining hall connected to hidden passages accessible only through precise manipulation of seemingly decorative elements. Trevor didn't just build a mansion, he constructed a labyrinth designed to confound, to test, and ultimately to contain. Spencer praised the work. He invited Trevor and his family to stay at the completed mansion as guests of honor. Trevor's wife Jessica and their 14-year-old daughter Lisa arrived first in November 1967, planning to spend a week enjoying the fruits of George's labor before he could join them. They settled into the guest rooms, admired the stained glass portrait of Lisa commissioned by Spencer, explored the grounds that wound through the mountainside. Lisa played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata on the grand piano in the smoking lounge, her fingers moving across keys in a house that would become her prison. That night, both were taken to the underground research facility hidden beneath the mansion. Spencer had always intended this. The elaborate security measures Trevor designed, the puzzles, the traps, the hidden pathways, were never meant to protect Umbrella's secrets from external threats. They were meant to ensure that anyone trapped inside could never find their way out. Trevor had been commissioned to build his own family's cage, and he'd done so with meticulous precision. When George finally arrived days later, eager to reunite with his family, Spencer's staff imprisoned him as well. Trevor's knowledge of the mansion's hidden architecture made him too dangerous to release. He alone knew every secret passage, every concealed mechanism, every way in and out of the labyrinth he'd created. For weeks, Trevor survived in the corridors he designed, using his intimate understanding of the structure to evade capture. He navigated the puzzles, avoided the traps, moved through spaces that should have been secure. His own genius kept him alive, but it couldn't save him. Eventually, Trevor found the cemetery hidden on the mansion grounds. There, among graves bearing names of test subjects who'd come before, stood a fresh tombstone with his own name carved into stone. Spencer had arranged this detail personally, a final psychological cruelty to break whatever hope remained. Trevor wrote in his journal about seeing that grave, about understanding that Spencer had never intended to let him leave, about the despair of realizing his fate had been decided before he ever set foot on the property. The journal ends abruptly. His body was never officially recovered, though staff records suggest he died somewhere in the hidden chambers beneath the mansion, still trying to find a way out of the structure he'd designed to be inescapable. The mystery isn't what happened to George Trevor. Records confirm he died in that mansion, another victim of Spencer's paranoia and Umbrella's insatiable need for secrecy. The mystery is what it felt like to die lost in your own creation, to be trapped by your own brilliance, to understand too late that every clever mechanism you designed with pride had become the instrument of your destruction. Trevor built a masterpiece of architecture that would define survival horror for generations of players, but he never knew it. He only knew that the walls he'd drawn on blueprints now pressed in from all sides, and no amount of architectural genius could show him the way home. The Spencer Mansion stood until July 25th, 1998, when STARS operative Rebecca Chambers activated the self-destruct sequence. The explosion destroyed decades of illegal research, countless specimens, and the physical structure itself. But Trevor's design philosophy survived in every Resident Evil location that came after. The puzzle boxes disguised as police stations, the research facilities where progression requires finding medallions and solving riddles, the architectural spaces that test players not through combat, but through navigation and problem solving. George Trevor's unintended legacy was teaching Umbrella how to build places that could trap people forever, and teaching Resident Evil how to make that entrapment feel like gameplay. His gravestone in that cemetery bore a simple inscription, just his name and dates. No epitaph about his accomplishments, no mention of his architectural achievements. Spencer robbed him even of that small dignity. The mansion that should have been Trevor's crowning achievement became his anonymous tomb, and the only ones who would ever appreciate his work were the desperate survivors trying to escape it, players who'd spend hours admiring the intricate design while trying not to die within it. The girl who couldn't die. Lisa Trevor survived 30 years of experimentation that should have killed her in the first week. She became something that transcended human biology, something that shouldn't have been possible, even in a world of bioweapons and viral engineering. Her existence challenged everything Umbrella thought they understood about the limits of mutation, about what a human body could endure and still maintain some spark of consciousness. She was 14 years old when they injected her with the type B strain of progenitor virus. She was 44 when STARS finally encountered her in 1998, a creature that had forgotten what it meant to be human, but never quite forgot the face of the mother she'd lost 3 decades earlier. The experiments began immediately after Lisa and Jessica arrived at the mansion. Mother and daughter were separated, each injected with different strains, each observed for signs of mutation or rejection. Jessica received type A. Her body couldn't process the viral load. Within days, the convulsions started, then the fever, then the rapid cellular breakdown that characterized progenitor rejection. Umbrella researchers noted her failure in clinical terms, terminated her as a failed specimen, and disposed of the body. They told Lisa nothing. They simply removed her mother from the facility and let the girl wonder where she'd gone. Lisa's reaction was different. Type B progenitor integrated into her cellular structure in ways the researchers hadn't anticipated. Her body began changing, enhanced strength, accelerated healing, mutations that suggested adaptation rather than rejection. She survived the initial infection. She survived the subsequent tests. She survived injection after injection of experimental compounds, each one designed to push the boundaries of what viral engineering could accomplish. Her body became a living laboratory for every strain Umbrella wanted to test, every modification they thought might yield useful results. The psychological deterioration started early. Separated from her parents in an underground facility, subjected to procedures she couldn't understand by people who treated her as an object rather than a child, Lisa's mental state fragmented. Her diary entries from those first months show a mind struggling to process abandonment and pain. She wrote about looking for her mother, about wanting to go home, about not understanding why the tests hurt so much. The handwriting grew progressively less controlled, the entries more confused, the grip on reality looser with each passing week. Umbrella tried to manage this deterioration. They assigned staff members to impersonate Jessica, thinking they could placate the increasingly violent test subject by providing a familiar presence. The first attempt ended with Lisa attacking the impersonator during a supervised meal. The creature that had been a 14-year-old girl attacked the woman she thought had stolen her mother's face. She tried to cut it off, believing in her fragmenting mind that she could somehow return the face to the real Jessica. When the impersonator died from her wounds, Lisa added the face to her own, wearing it like a mask in a grotesque attempt to keep her mother close. This happened 3 more times over the years. Each time Umbrella assigned someone to play Jessica's role, Lisa would eventually realize the deception and react with the same horrific violence. The faces of these victims joined the collection Lisa wore, creating a layered mask of human flesh that covered whatever remained of her own features. She became unrecognizable as the girl in the stained glass portrait, transformed into something that wore human faces the way others might wear jewelry. Desperate tokens of a connection she could no longer properly remember, but couldn't stop seeking. The viral experimentation continued. In 1978, when Dr. Albert Wesker and Dr. William Birkin transferred to the Arklay laboratory, Lisa had been a test subject for 11 years. The new researchers found her fascinating, a specimen that had survived every viral strain administered, whose body had adapted in ways that suggested possibilities beyond conventional bioweapon development. They subjected her to the T virus in various iterations. Each time, her body absorbed the infection, mutated in new directions, but never died. Her regenerative capabilities became so pronounced that conventional termination methods failed completely. By 1988, Lisa had become the key to Umbrella's greatest breakthrough. Wesker and Birkin implanted her with the NE-alpha parasite, a component of the Nemesis project that had killed every previous host within 5 minutes of introduction. Lisa absorbed the parasite completely, integrating it into her already heavily mutated physiology. The researchers analyzing her blood discovered something unprecedented: a new viral strain forming from the interaction of all the infections her body had processed over 2 decades. They called it the Golgotha virus, or G virus. Lisa Trevor, the discarded daughter of an architect, had become the foundation for William Birkin's most significant research contribution to Umbrella's bioweapons program. She was no longer useful after that. The G virus had been isolated, cultured, and weaponized. Lisa had served her purpose. Umbrella decided to terminate the experiment. They shot her repeatedly. The wounds healed. They tried burning. Her flesh regenerated. They attempted chemical dissolution. Her body resisted. Finally, they loaded her onto a transport and dumped her somewhere in the Arklay Mountains with a missile launcher blast to ensure termination. But Lisa wouldn't die. Even that wasn't enough to stop whatever she'd become. She took up residence in a cabin on the mansion grounds, wandering the tunnels she remembered from decades of underground imprisonment. She couldn't die, but she couldn't live either, trapped in a state between, driven by fragmented memories and instincts she couldn't articulate. When stars entered the mansion in July 1998, Lisa was still there, still searching for something she'd lost 3 decades earlier and could no longer clearly remember wanting. The encounter in the underground altar provided Lisa's only moment of closure. Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield solved the puzzle of the stone coffin, removing the 4 death masks that had sealed it shut for 30 years. The coffin opened to reveal Jessica Trevor's skeletal remains, perfectly preserved by the sealed environment. Lisa saw her mother's corpse and understood, really understood for the first time in 30 years, that Jessica was gone. The realization broke whatever remained of her consciousness. She grabbed her mother's skull, cradled it, and jumped into the chasm beneath the altar. After 3 decades of searching, she'd found what she was looking for, and it was too terrible to bear. But even that fall didn't kill her. The resident evil, the Umbrella Chronicles revealed Lisa survived, climbing back up through the underground passages just as the mansion's self-destruct sequence activated. She encountered Wesker in the main hall, recognized him as one of her tormentors, and chased him through the building with single-minded fury. Wesker escaped by dropping a chandelier on her, pinning her beneath rubble as the countdown continued. The massive explosion that destroyed the Spencer mansion finally succeeded, where 3 decades of experimental termination had failed. Lisa Trevor died in the fire that consumed the place that had imprisoned her since childhood, surrounded by the architecture her father had designed and never escaped. The mystery of Lisa Trevor isn't what Umbrella did to her. The files document every viral strain, every procedure, every failed attempt at termination. The mystery is what it felt like to be her, locked in that cabin, wearing the faces of women who'd pretended to be her mother, holding on to a memory of family that grew more distorted with each passing year until it became the only thing keeping some fragment of humanity alive in a body that had ceased being human decades earlier. She couldn't remember what her mother's face actually looked like. She only knew she needed to find it, needed to bring it back, needed to make something right that had gone wrong when she was 14 and couldn't possibly understand what was happening to her. Lisa became one of the most powerful beings Umbrella ever created, effectively immortal, superhumanly strong, capable of withstanding damage that would destroy a tyrant. But she never asked for any of it. She just wanted her mother back, and 30 years of viral engineering couldn't make that possible. The G virus that revolutionized bioweapon development came from a girl who only wanted to go home, extracted from a body that had endured every horror Umbrella could devise because it had forgotten how to die. That's the real terror at the heart of Lisa Trevor's story. Not what she became, but what she remained. Underneath all those mutation and viral strains and collected faces, she was still that 14-year-old girl waiting for her mother to come back, never understanding that her mother had been dead since 1967, just a few rooms away in an unmarked grave that Lisa would spend 3 decades trying to open. The scientist who loved his virus too much. William Birkin stood in his laboratory on September the 23rd, 1998, cradling the last viable sample of G virus like it was his child. In some ways, it was. He'd spent 14 years developing it, nurturing it from a preliminary discovery in Lisa Trevor's blood into the most sophisticated viral weapon ever created. He'd sacrificed his marriage's intimacy for it, neglected his actual daughter Sherry for it, alienated his only friend Albert Wesker over it. The G virus was his legacy, his proof of genius, his ticket to the executive position at Umbrella that he'd been promised and never received. No one would take it from him. He'd die before he let them steal what was rightfully his creation. Minutes later, he would die, but death wouldn't stop him from fighting to keep it. The Umbrella Security Service team entered the NEST facility with orders to retrieve the G virus by any means necessary. Birkin had been planning to betray the company, to sell his research to the U.S. military in exchange for protection and funding to continue his work outside corporate restrictions. Umbrella discovered the plan. They responded with characteristic efficiency. Send in the cleaners, eliminate the security threat, secure the asset. The team found Birkin in Laboratory C, clutching the sample case, refusing to surrender his life's work. They shot him multiple times, center mass, professionally placed shots designed to incapacitate and kill. Birkin collapsed, bleeding out on the sterile laboratory floor he'd walked for 14 years. But they took the wrong case. In their haste to complete the mission, the USS operatives grabbed a container holding T-virus samples instead of the G-virus vials. They didn't realize their mistake until later, by which point it was far too late to correct. Birkin, dying on the floor, watched them take what he thought was his virus. With his last conscious moments as a human being, he crawled across the laboratory to where the actual G virus samples were stored. He injected himself with the contents of one vial, all of it, enough viral material to kill a dozen test subjects. He injected it directly into his bloodstream and waited for the transformation. The G virus wasn't designed to create controllable weapons. Unlike the T virus, which produced reliable zombie hosts, or even the advanced Nemesis parasite, which maintained some capacity for following orders, G was unpredictable. Birkin had been trying to perfect it for years, trying to develop a strain that would create what he called G humans, a superior form of life that could reproduce and propagate, creating an entirely new species. He'd been pressured by Umbrella management to weaponize it, to develop conventional bioweapon applications. His research had been incomplete when they came for him. The virus he injected was powerful but unstable, capable of causing massive mutation but lacking the refinement that would have made those mutations survivable or controllable. The transformation began immediately. Birkin's body rejected its human form with violent enthusiasm. His right side mutated first, the arm swelling with unnatural muscle mass, the skin tearing and reforming into patterns that bore no resemblance to human anatomy. A massive eyeball erupted from his shoulder, fully functional, tracking movement with inhuman precision. Bone-like protrusions broke through his flesh. His left side remained relatively human, a grotesque contrast that made the mutations on his right even more disturbing. His face shifted, features distorting as the virus rewrote his genetic code at the cellular level, but he retained enough consciousness to know what had happened. enough awareness to feel rage. The G-infected Birkin hunted down the USS team in Raccoon City sewers. He killed them systematically, with methodical violence that suggested some fragment of human thought still guided the monster's actions. During the rampage, the case they'd stolen broke open. T-virus samples spilled into the sewage system. Rats consumed the contaminated material, became vectors themselves, spread the infection throughout Raccoon City's underground infrastructure. Within days, the virus reached the city's water treatment facilities. Within weeks, the entire population was infected. William Birkin, trying to protect his research from theft, inadvertently triggered the Raccoon City outbreak. His decision to inject himself with an unstable virus created the cascade of events that would kill over 100,000 people and necessitate the city's complete destruction. But he never knew. Whatever remained of his consciousness after that first transformation couldn't comprehend consequences beyond the immediate. He became a creature of pure instinct, the need to propagate, to find genetically compatible hosts, to reproduce in the only way the G virus permitted. He sought out his daughter. Genetic memory or fragmented paternal instinct led the mutated Birkin through Raccoon City to the orphanage where Sherry had taken refuge. He recognized her on some level. She was compatible. Shared DNA meant the G embryos he could now produce might actually take root instead of being violently rejected. He implanted one in her body. His own daughter became a host for parasitic offspring, infected not through accident but through deliberate biological imperative. The mutations continued. Each major injury triggered a new form. The first form maintained some human characteristics. Birkin's face was visible, though distorted, his body plan recognizable even with the massive mutations. He wielded a pipe as a weapon with enough coordination to suggest retained motor skills. But when Leon and Claire damaged him sufficiently, the virus forced a more dramatic transformation. The second form grew a new head as the original was absorbed into his torso. Additional limbs sprouted from his body. The eyeball in his shoulder expanded. His right arm developed claws that resembled those on super tyrants, suggesting shared developmental pathways in Umbrella's bioweapon research. By the third form, whatever remained of William Birkin's consciousness had been completely overwritten by viral instinct. The massive creature that chased Leon and Claire through the NEST facility bore no resemblance to a human being. It moved on four legs like some prehistoric predator, festooned with eyeballs in seemingly random locations, driven purely by the need to eliminate threats and find compatible hosts. A fourth transformation made it larger still, even more aggressive, less stable. The mutations were spiraling out of control as the incomplete G virus continued rewriting his genetic structure without any endpoint, without any final form that might offer stability. The fifth and final form was barely recognizable as a living organism, a massive blob of flesh with a lamprey-like mouth dominated by an enormous eye, trailing partially digested zombie corpses it had consumed along the way. This wasn't evolution. This was breakdown. The virus pushing mutation past any sustainable threshold, creating something that couldn't survive even if it won its fights. The creature that had been William Birkin attacked Leon and Claire one last time on the train they'd boarded to escape Raccoon City. They separated the car he'd entered, watched it roll back into the underground facility just as the self-destruct sequence reached its conclusion. The explosion finally destroyed what 3 prior attempts at killing him had only transformed. Birkin's actual daughter survived. Sherry Birkin, infected with G, received an antigen treatment from her mother Annette before the virus could complete its work. The treatment halted the infection but couldn't eliminate it entirely. She retained G cells in her bloodstream, gained regenerative abilities that would keep her appearing 20 years old for decades to come, became the closest thing to a successful G-human that would ever exist. She carried forward her father's legacy not as a bioweapon, but as a freak accident of partial infection and medical intervention. The mystery isn't what happened to William Birkin. Files and security footage document his transformation, his rampage, his progressive mutations, his final destruction. The mystery is what he wanted in those last moments of human consciousness, when he made the choice to inject himself with an incomplete virus rather than die alone in his laboratory. Did he believe he could survive as himself? Did he think the transformation might be controllable? Or did he simply refuse to let Umbrella win, refuse to let his life's work be stolen, refuse to accept that 14 years of research and sacrifice meant nothing to the corporation that employed him? He called the G virus his precious in those final moments of humanity. He spoke to it like a parent speaks to a child. Perhaps he loved it more than he loved his actual daughter, more than his wife, more than anything else in his life. That love transformed him into a monster that killed thousands and devastated a city, that implanted its own offspring into its own child, that died screaming his daughter's name in a form so mutated it couldn't even articulate the words properly anymore. William Birkin achieved his dream of perfect biological evolution. He became a new form of life. He just didn't survive the experience long enough to appreciate what he'd accomplished, and the world paid the price for his ambition in blood and fire and nuclear cleansing. The city that America erased, Raccoon City, ceased to exist at 6:35 a.m. on October 1st, 1998. The government called it a sterilization strategy. Military documentation referred to it as Operation Bacillus Terminate. The Pentagon's classified files described it as a thermobaric missile strike designed to eliminate a viral outbreak that threatened to spread across the entire region. All true, all insufficient, because the destruction of Raccoon City wasn't just about stopping a zombie outbreak. It was about burying evidence, protecting secrets, and eliminating any proof that the United States government had been complicit in illegal bioweapons development for decades. The outbreak began on September 23rd, when rats contaminated with T virus from Birkin's rampage spread the infection through the city's water system. Within 24 hours, the first cases appeared: violent behavior, necrosis, symptoms that emergency responders couldn't explain using any conventional medical framework. Within 48 hours, the hospitals were overwhelmed. Within 72 hours, the infection had spread to such an extent that conventional containment became impossible. Raccoon City descended into chaos as 100,000 citizens transformed into walking corpses, driven by a single biological imperative to feed on living flesh. The U.S. government knew about the outbreak immediately. The CDC received briefings. The military had units on standby. Congressional committees discussed response options while the city burned. But those discussions weren't about how to save Raccoon City or evacuate its residents. They were about containment, about damage control, about ensuring that what happened in Raccoon City couldn't spread, couldn't become public knowledge, couldn't reveal decades of illegal military research conducted under the guise of pharmaceutical development. Umbrella had been developing biological weapons for the American military since the 1960s. The Pentagon funded their research, provided oversight, facilitated their operations even when those operations violated international law and the Biological Weapons Convention. Raccoon City was the headquarters of Umbrella's American operations, the site of their primary research facility. the place where they conducted human experimentation and developed viral strains designed explicitly for military applications. The government couldn't allow that information to become public. They certainly couldn't let foreign powers like China discover the full extent of America's bioweapons program, so they deployed the Umbrella Security Service to establish a perimeter. They sent in Delta Force operators to assess the situation. They denied the outbreak's existence in official channels while preparing a solution that would eliminate both the viral threat and any evidence of government complicity. The sterilization strategy served dual purposes: stop the T virus from spreading beyond the city limits and ensure that no documents, research materials, or surviving witnesses could reveal the truth about who had funded and facilitated Umbrella's work. The evacuation was selective. Government personnel received priority extraction. Umbrella executives and key researchers were pulled out via helicopter. Certain survivors, those who might prove useful later, like Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield, were allowed to escape. But the vast majority of Raccoon City's residents never received evacuation orders. The roadblocks established at city limits had shoot-to-kill orders for anyone attempting to leave without authorization. Citizens trying to flee the zombie hordes were gunned down by their own government to maintain the quarantine. The missile struck at dawn. Official documentation claims a single, experimental, thermobaric weapon, though some reports mention multiple Angel Arrow missiles launched from Dallas Air Force Base. The weapon created a massive fireball that consumed the entire city, generating temperatures hot enough to vaporize organic matter and destroy any remaining viral samples. The explosion could be seen from 18 miles away. Survivors watching from the perimeter described a mushroom cloud that briefly made them think someone had used a nuclear weapon. In the aftermath, the official story was carefully constructed. The government initially denied everything, claiming the destruction resulted from a chemical plant accident or industrial explosion. Later, they pivoted to acknowledging Umbrella's involvement while maintaining that the government had no knowledge of illegal activities. The trial that followed dragged on for 5 years, hampered by lack of physical evidence that the missile strike had conveniently destroyed and government witnesses who refused to testify for fear of implicating themselves. Publicly, the T-virus and bioweapons development remained classified. The government continued denying their existence even as survivors testified about zombies, mutants, and experimental creatures. Those testimonies were dismissed as trauma-induced delusions, impossible claims from people who'd survived a horrific accident but couldn't be trusted to accurately describe what they'd seen. The official death toll was listed at 100,000, the city's entire population, even though that number was based on census data rather than actual body recovery, since there were no bodies to recover from a thermobaric blast site. A government research station was quietly established in the ruins. Their stated purpose was environmental monitoring and cleanup. Their actual purpose was to collect any remaining T-virus samples that might have survived the blast, to recover whatever research materials could be salvaged from underground facilities, to ensure that no evidence of government involvement remained accessible. The Anti-Umbrella Pursuit and Investigation Team was created to hunt down former Umbrella employees and customers, ostensibly to prevent bioweapon proliferation, but also to eliminate anyone who might reveal what the government had known and when they'd known it. The cover-up succeeded. For years afterward, most of the world believed Raccoon City's destruction was a tragic accident compounded by corporate negligence. Umbrella took the blame. Their bankruptcy and dissolution satisfied public demands for accountability. The government's role remained buried, classified at levels that ensured Only a handful of people knew the full truth. When bioweapons became undeniable public knowledge, years later, following incidents that couldn't be covered up, the narrative positioned America as a victim of Umbrella's criminal actions rather than a willing participant in illegal weapons development. The mystery isn't what happened to Raccoon City. The missile strike is documented. The outbreak is documented. Even the government's motivations are documented in classified files that have partially leaked over the years. The mystery is how they convinced the world to accept a lie that obvious, that massive, that easily disproven by simple questions about government response times and evacuation failures. 100,000 people died in Raccoon City. Their government knew about the outbreak. They had the resources to attempt evacuation. They chose to kill everyone inside the quarantine zone rather than risk their secrets escaping. Then they blamed a corporation for actions the government had funded and facilitated for 3 decades. They destroyed an entire American city with experimental weapons, killed tens of thousands of citizens, and successfully convinced the public that it was necessary, that it was justified, that there were no other options. Some survivors spent years trying to reveal the truth. They published testimonies, provided evidence, demanded congressional investigations. They were dismissed as conspiracy theorists, traumatized victims clinging to false memories, unreliable witnesses whose accounts contradicted each other because trauma affects memory. The government won not by suppressing the truth, but by making the truth sound so absurd that no one believed it, even when presented with evidence. President Benford would attempt to disclose the classified information years later, planning to reveal America's role in bioweapons development and take responsibility for Raccoon City. The family, a shadow organization with connections to American intelligence, assassinated him before he could complete that disclosure. They orchestrated another outbreak in Tall Oaks to kill him, then authorized another sterilization operation to destroy that evidence as well. The pattern continued: outbreak, cover up, missile strike, denial. Raccoon City established the blueprint that would be used again whenever the truth threatened to surface. The ruins of Raccoon City remain fenced off and classified. You can't visit them. You can't investigate them. The official reason is environmental contamination from the industrial accident. The real reason is that underground facilities survived the blast, still contain evidence, still hold secrets the government can't allow anyone to discover. Raccoon City isn't gone. It's just been declared to not exist, erased from maps while the ruins remain. A wound in American geography that nobody's allowed to examine too closely. The ghosts aren't zombies. They're the citizens who died knowing their government had abandoned them, who spent their last hours trying to escape a quarantine perimeter that wouldn't let them leave, who watched the sunrise on October 1st and understood what that light in the sky meant. The real horror of Raccoon City isn't the viral outbreak. It's the conscious decision to let 100,000 people die rather than admit what their government had helped create. The immortal soldier without a name. His call sign was Hunk. The Umbrella Security Service referred to him as the Grim Reaper. His official designation was Alpha Team, leader of the USS. Everyone who fought alongside him agreed on one fact: no matter how bad the mission went, no matter how many operatives died, Hunk would survive. Always. The human unit never killed might sound like dark humor, but after enough operations where every team member died except him, the nickname became less joke and more statement of impossible fact. Hunk had no discernible identity beyond his role as an Umbrella operative, no records of his recruitment, no file containing his real name or background. Military databases had nothing. Intelligence networks had nothing. Even within Umbrella's internal documentation, Hunk appeared only in operational reports and mission briefings, always as a call sign rather than a person. He existed purely as function, the soldier who completed objectives regardless of cost, who extracted intelligence regardless of casualties, who survived situations that killed everyone around him through some combination of skill and impossible luck. His most famous operation was the G virus retrieval. On September 23, 1998, Hunk led a team into the NEST facility with orders to secure William Birkin's research and eliminate the security threat he represented. The mission went catastrophically wrong. Birkin was shot but not killed quickly enough. He injected himself with G virus. He transformed into something that hunted the entire team through Raccoon City sewers. One by one, Hunk's operatives died. Gunfire didn't stop the creature. Tactical retreats didn't shake it. The mutated Birkin killed them methodically, tracking the team through underground passages until only Hunk remained. The retrieval case broke during the fighting. T-virus samples spilled into the sewage system. The contamination that would kill 100,000 people began spreading while Hunk fought his way to the extraction point. He carried what he thought was the G-virus sample through a city descending into chaos, past zombies that started appearing within hours of the initial contamination, through streets where civilians were already exhibiting infection symptoms. He navigated Raccoon City alone, wounded, hunted by both the monsters his own mission had inadvertently created and the G mutation that had killed his entire team. Hunk reached the extraction point. He transmitted the retrieval signal. Umbrella sent a helicopter. Against every reasonable probability, despite the mission failure and massive contamination and complete team casualties, Hunk completed the objective. He survived what everyone called the fourth survivor scenario because he'd been the fourth and final operative extracted from an operation where survival seemed impossible. The sample he delivered turned out to be T-virus rather than G-virus, but that wasn't Hunk's failure. His team had grabbed the wrong case. His job was to survive and deliver what they'd retrieved. He did exactly that. But this was just one mission in a career of impossible survivals. Hunk appeared in Resident Evil, Code Veronica, delivering a sample to Rockford Island before the outbreak that would devastate that facility. He was present for operations in South America. Files reference his involvement in extraction missions across multiple continents. Each time, the pattern repeated. The operation would go wrong. The team would suffer casualties. The situation would deteriorate beyond reasonable recovery, and Hunk would complete the objective and extract successfully. Other operatives developed superstitions about serving with him. Being assigned to Hunk's team meant you'd probably complete the mission, but you'd definitely die in the process. Some refused assignments where Hunk was team leader. Others specifically requested them, believing his survival rate meant better chances even if individual team members didn't make it out. The statistics supported both interpretations. Hunk's missions had higher objective completion rates than any other USS operative. They also had higher casualty rates. The only constant was that Hunk himself would survive. The mystery compounds with each appearance because Hunk never changes. Other characters age, evolve, show the psychological impact of surviving bioweapon incidents. Hunk remains identical across years and operations. Same gas mask concealing his face, same tactical gear, same efficient combat methodology, same complete lack of personality beyond operational efficiency. He doesn't speak unnecessarily. He doesn't form relationships with other operatives. He doesn't question orders or express opinions about Umbrella's ethics. He exists purely as a weapon, pointed at targets and activated. Some theories about Hunk suggest he's not human at all, that Umbrella created him as a bioweapon designed to look human, or enhanced him so extensively that calling him human became technically incorrect. The survival rate supports this. No normal soldier should consistently be the only survivor of operations where entire teams die. No conventional training explains how he navigated Raccoon City alone during an outbreak and reached an extraction point that most people couldn't find with full support. His complete lack of visible identity or background suggests something deeper than simple security protocols, but the files never confirm this. Hunk remains officially listed as human. No documentation references any enhancement procedures or experimental modifications. He's just an extremely skilled operative who happens to survive situations that kill everyone around him. The mundane explanation is somehow more disturbing than the bioweapon theory because it suggests that this level of survival, this consistency of being the last one standing, this complete subordination of personality to function, is something a human being can achieve through pure professionalism. After Umbrella's collapse, Hunk disappeared from official records. No files reference his fate. No intelligence agencies reported capturing or killing an operative matching his description. He simply ceased appearing in documentation, as though he'd never existed outside of mission reports. Some claimed he continued working for other organizations, selling his skills to whoever would pay. Others suggested he died in an operation that simply went unreported. The most disturbing theory is that he's still out there, still taking contracts, still completing objectives regardless of cost, still surviving situations that kill everyone around him. The mystery isn't whether Hunk is human or bioweapon, alive or dead, working or retired. The mystery is what it takes to become Hunk. What transformations, biological, psychological, or both, does someone undergo to achieve that level of function, to survive that consistently, to subordinate everything human about themselves to operational efficiency? Can you become the Grim Reaper without dying in some fundamental way yourself? And if you can, what exactly survives inside that gas mask when the human parts have been stripped away for mission effectiveness? Hunk represents the logical endpoint of Umbrella's philosophy, applied to human operatives instead of bioweapons. Maximum efficiency, minimum personality, perfect survival through perfect adaptation to the requirements of the role. He's terrifying not because he's a monster, but because he might not be one at all. He might just be what you become when you're very, very good at your job, and your job is surviving things that kill everyone else. The mask hides his face, but maybe there's nothing underneath that needs hiding anymore. Maybe Hunk is just the mask, the call sign, the function, and the human who originally wore it ceased to exist years ago in some operation where the only way to survive was to stop being entirely human. The merchant who shouldn't exist. The merchant appears in places no merchant should be, deep in a remote Spanish village where Los Illuminados has transformed the entire population into ganados. Inside, fortified castles, controlled by fanatical cultists. In underground research facilities and ancient ruins, he sets up shop in locations where every human being has been either killed or infected, smiling beneath a hooded coat, asking, "What are you buying?" in a Cockney accent that makes no geographic sense for rural Spain. Leon Kennedy encounters him dozens of times during his mission to rescue Ashley Graham. Each time, the merchant has somehow arrived first, set up his portable shop, acquired inventory that includes weapons Leon desperately needs, and upgrade materials that shouldn't exist in a village that's been isolated for years. He buys treasure from Leon at fair prices. He sells ammunition, healing items, and weapons modifications with no questions about why an American agent is slaughtering his way through the region. He offers his services with cheerful professionalism and never, ever explains how he got there or why the ganados don't attack him. The merchant appears to be infected himself. His eyes glow with the same bioluminescence that marks Plaga's infection. His physical build resembles the ganados. His voice has the rough quality of someone whose body has undergone the parasitic transformation that turns humans into Los Illuminados slaves. Every visible indicator suggests he should be hostile, should be trying to kill Leon on sight like every other infected individual in the region. Instead, he's friendly, helpful, and genuinely happy to do business. He knows things no merchant should know. He comments on Leon's progress through the village. He offers weapons that will be particularly useful for upcoming challenges Leon hasn't encountered yet. His inventory changes based on what Leon needs rather than what a traveling merchant could reasonably carry. When Leon finds him in underground areas that require solving elaborate puzzles to access, the merchant has somehow not only gotten there first but also set up shop, as though he's been waiting specifically for Leon to arrive. The organization that controls the village, Los Illuminados, has complete authority over anyone infected with Las Plagas. The parasites allow cult leader Osmond Sadler to command infected individuals absolutely. Ganados attack Leon because Sadler wants him dead or infected. The merchant operates freely in areas where Sadler's control should be absolute. Either the merchant isn't actually infected, or he's somehow immune to Sadler's control, or Sadler specifically allows him to operate independently for reasons never explained. In the 2005 original game, the merchant's presence could be dismissed as gameplay convenience. He's there because players need a way to upgrade weapons and purchase supplies. But the 2023 remake leaned into the mystery instead of explaining it away. The updated merchant has more personality, more dialogue, more presence as an actual character rather than a simple gameplay mechanic. He remembers Leon across multiple encounters. He makes jokes. He expresses genuine interest in Leon's survival and success. The remake emphasizes that he's a real entity within the game's world rather than an abstract service, which makes his impossible existence even more pronounced. Theories about the merchant's identity multiply precisely because the games never address them. Some suggest he's working for Ada Wong, helping Leon complete his mission because Ada's mysterious employer wants Ashley rescued. This explains his helpful attitude and knowledge of Leon's situation, but doesn't explain how he operates freely in Plagas-controlled territory, or why he appears in locations Ada couldn't possibly have prepared in advance. Others theorize he's a former Los Illuminados member who achieved independence from Sadler's control, possibly through a unique reaction to Plagas infection that preserved his autonomy. This explains his presence in cult-controlled areas and his apparent infection symptoms, but doesn't explain why Sadler tolerates his operation or how he acquires modern weapons to sell in an isolated rural community. The darkest theory suggests the merchant is part of the village itself, some manifestation of Las Plagas' collective consciousness that has decided Leon should survive because his rampage through the region serves some deeper purpose. Perhaps killing infected villagers and destroying cult facilities benefits the parasite in ways Sadler doesn't understand. Perhaps Las Plagas itself wants Sadler stopped, and the merchant represents the parasite's attempt to ensure Leon succeeds. This explains everything except why a parasitic organism would have Cockney accent and merchant's enthusiasm for capitalism. The merchant appears in multiple Resident Evil titles. He shows up in Resident Evil 5's Mercenaries mode. He's referenced in other games. Each appearance reinforces that he's not unique to the Spanish Village incident, that wherever bioweapon incidents occur, the merchant will somehow appear to offer his services to survivors. He transcends individual outbreaks to become a recurring constant in situations where normal commerce shouldn't be possible. The mystery deepens when considering what he wants. He accepts payment in the form of pesetas, Spanish currency. What does the merchant do with money acquired from someone who's killing his way through a remote village? Where does he spend it? What does a possibly infected merchant who sets up shop in places controlled by parasitic organisms need with currency at all? He could simply take what he wants from Leon's corpse if Leon dies. He could steal from the villages he apparently has free access to. Instead, he insists on fair transactions, on maintaining the pretense of normal commerce in circumstances that are anything but normal. Some players report seeing the merchant in locations they didn't visit, suggesting he moves through the game's world independently of Leon's progression. Others claim to find evidence of his presence, discarded items, disturbed areas, in locations where he never actually appears. The remake includes notes that might reference him, cryptic writings about a stranger who helps those who wander into the village. The game never confirms these references are about the merchant, but who else could they mean? The most unsettling aspect of the merchant is his cheerfulness. In a game filled with body horror, religious fanaticism, and parasitic infection, the merchant remains upbeat and helpful. He genuinely seems to enjoy his work, to take pride in offering quality goods and services. His enthusiasm for commerce persists regardless of how many corpses Leon leaves behind or how close the cult comes to achieving their goals. He treats the Spanish Village incident like a normal business opportunity, and his attitude suggests he's encountered similar situations before and expects to encounter them again. Leon never questions the merchant's presence. He takes advantage of the services offered without asking how this person got here or why he's helping. The game encourages this behavior, trying to attack the merchant results in him easily dodging and expressing disappointment that Leon would repay his assistance with violence. He's invincible through being essentially non-hostile, existing in a space outside the normal rules of the game's world. The mystery of the merchant isn't who he is, it's what he represents. In a series defined by conspiracy and corporate evil and government cover-ups, the merchant is genuinely helpful with no hidden agenda. He asks only for fair payment and offers genuine value in return. He appears when needed and disappears when the job is done. He's impossible and shouldn't exist, but he does. And his existence makes the horror around him even more unsettling, because it confirms that some things in the Resident Evil universe operate by rules nobody understands or can predict. The viruses and parasites and bioweapons follow scientific principles, even when those principles are horrific. The merchant follows no principles at all. He just appears, smiling beneath his hood, asking what you're buying, and somehow that's more mysterious than any zombie or mutant creature in the entire franchise. The organization Ada works for. Ada Wong has been selling bioweapon intelligence for decades. Her operations span multiple continents and countless outbreaks. She infiltrated Raccoon City during the initial incident. She appeared in Spain during the Los Illuminados crisis. She was present in China, in Africa, in every major bioweapon incident documented since 1998. Every faction wants her dead or recruited. Every major player in the bioweapon black market knows her reputation. She's the most successful, independent operative in a field dominated by corporate and military organizations. And nobody knows who she actually works for. She claims to work for different organizations depending on who's asking. In Raccoon City, she posed as an FBI agent looking for her boyfriend. That cover story lasted until convenient. Later, she claimed to be working for Umbrella, then for a rival corporation, then for various intelligence agencies. The stories change. The lies layer over previous lies until determining what might be true becomes impossible. Only one constant remains. Ada always serves her own interests first, and those interests align mysteriously well with Leon Kennedy's survival. Her relationship with Leon complicates every analysis of her motivations. They met in Raccoon City during the outbreak. He was a rookie cop on his first day. She was an experienced operative gathering intelligence on the G virus. She used him, manipulated him, lied to him about her identity and purpose. Then she saved his life multiple times, helped him escape the city, and died, or appeared to die, protecting him from danger. Except she didn't die. Wesker somehow extracted her from the wreckage, used his experimental virus to heal her injuries, and set her loose again with new objectives. In Spain, Ada received orders to retrieve Las Plagas samples. Her employer wanted to weaponize the parasites. She infiltrated Los Illuminados territory, navigated the same horrors Leon faced, and completed her objectives with characteristic efficiency. But she also consistently helped Leon, sabotaging her own mission at critical moments to ensure he survived and rescued Ashley. She provided him with weapons, created distractions, eliminated threats he couldn't handle. When forced to choose between completing her mission and saving Leon's life, she chose Leon every time. This pattern repeats across her documented operations. Ada's primary objective always involves retrieving bioweapon samples or intelligence for whoever's currently employing her. Her secondary objective, never officially acknowledged but consistently demonstrated, involves ensuring Leon Kennedy survives and succeeds in his missions. These objectives conflict regularly. Ada resolves the conflict by helping Leon while maintaining plausible deniability about her assistance. She'll claim she just happened to be in position to provide covering fire, or that helping him served her own tactical needs, or that she had no choice given the circumstances. The lies are transparent. Leon knows she's helping him. She knows he knows. They both pretend otherwise because the truth complicates everything. The organization she works for remains deliberately mysterious. Wesker referred to them simply as the organization when discussing Ada's employment. Later files reference different groups: a rival corporation attempting to compete with Umbrella's bioweapon research, an intelligence agency gathering information on proliferation, a shadow faction with connections to multiple governments and corporations. The identities shift, the specifics remain vague. Only consistent detail is that they're powerful enough to compete with major players, wealthy enough to afford Ada's services, and patient enough to allow her apparent freelancing as long as she eventually delivers results. Some evidence suggests Ada actually works for herself, that the organization is a useful fiction she maintains to explain her presence to people who need to believe she's accountable to someone. By claiming to serve powerful employers, she gains respect and resources. By never specifying which organization, she maintains flexibility to adapt her story as situations require. This theory positions Ada as perhaps the only truly independent operator in a field where everyone else serves some master. But her actions contradict simple mercenary motivations. Ada takes contracts that put her in extraordinary danger for unclear compensation. She helps Leon despite that assist in complicating her primary objectives and potentially angering her employers. She demonstrates genuine emotion, rare for someone who's supposedly a professional manipulator, specifically when Leon's safety is threatened. If she's purely self-interested, her interest includes Leon's well-being at a level that transcends professional calculation. The mystery deepens when considering how much intelligence Ada has gathered over her career. She's witnessed multiple bioweapon programs. She's collected samples from nearly every major viral strain and parasitic organism developed since the T virus. She possesses comprehensive understanding of how the black market operates, who the major players are, what capabilities different organizations possess. This information would be extraordinarily valuable to governments, corporations, and intelligence agencies. Yet Ada continues taking contracts rather than selling that comprehensive knowledge for a massive payday and retirement. Perhaps her true employer is someone who doesn't care about bioweapon samples specifically, someone who wants Ada positioned to observe, to gather intelligence on everyone involved in bioweapon development and distribution, to maintain presence in situations where major incidents occur. An organization focused not on acquiring bioweapons but on understanding the full scope of who's developing them, who's buying them, how they're being used. An intelligence network that sees Ada's individual missions as less important than the overall pattern of information she provides. This would explain her longevity and success. Ada isn't trying to compete with organizations like Umbrella or TriCell. She's observing them, documenting them, providing intelligence to someone who's building comprehensive understanding of the entire bioweapon black market. Her real product isn't the samples she retrieves, it's the information about who wanted those samples, how they plan to use them, what their capabilities are, who they're connected to. The samples are just proof that she was present, that her reports are accurate, that she accessed spaces where critical activities occur. Leon represents an interesting variable in this analysis. As a government agent, he should be Ada's enemy, or at least a liability, but she consistently helps him despite knowing he works for American intelligence. Perhaps his survival serves her employer's interests. Perhaps an American agent successfully disrupting bioweapon operations actually helps whoever Ada works for by destabilizing other players in the black market. Or perhaps Ada helps Leon because the professional manipulator developed one genuine connection despite decades of lies and deception, and that connection matters more than any mission parameters. The clearest example of Ada's mysterious priorities occurs in Resident Evil 6. Her employer gave her direct orders to ensure Derek Simmons completed his plan to unleash the C virus. Instead, Ada helped Leon expose Simmons and stop the outbreak. She actively sabotaged her employer's objectives to protect Leon and prevent catastrophic casualties. She crossed the one line professional operatives never cross. She betrayed her employer's direct orders to follow her own conscience. The organization apparently forgave this betrayal or never knew about it because Ada continued operating afterward with no apparent consequences. This suggests her employer either agrees with her decision-making autonomy, can't control her effectively, or values her continued operation more than punishment for mission failure. All three possibilities raise questions about what kind of organization employs Ada and on what terms. Most employers would eliminate an operative who demonstrated that level of independence. Most operatives wouldn't risk that elimination by directly contradicting orders. Ada does regularly and continues working. The mystery isn't who Ada works for, it's whether she works for anyone at all, She might be the only truly free agent in Resident Evil's world, maintaining the fiction of employment because people trust servants more than they trust independent operators, using her reputation and connections to position herself in critical situations, and ultimately serving objectives that are entirely her own, even when she's nominally completing someone else's contract. If that's true, then her real purpose remains unknown. What is Ada trying to accomplish through decades of infiltrating bioweapon incidents, gathering samples, and ensuring Leon's survival? What game is she playing where helping an American government agent and stealing bioweapon intelligence both serve the same ultimate goal? The files never answer. Ada never explains. She just keeps appearing wherever bioweapons threaten to destabilize regions, complete her nominal objectives, help Leon survive, and disappear before anyone can ask her the questions that might finally reveal who she is and what she actually wants. The umbrella symbol in Village Miranda. Resident Evil Village seemed to tell a self-contained story. Ethan Winters searches for his kidnapped daughter in a remote Eastern European village controlled by four lords serving Mother Miranda. The mold, a fungal organism with mutagenic properties, serves as the source of mutation rather than viruses or parasites. The setting feels divorced from previous games, corporate conspiracies, and bioweapon programs. Then players discover the Umbrella Corporation's symbol carved into ancient stone in Miranda's laboratory, predating the company's existence by decades. The symbol appears on a mural that Miranda created long before Oswell Spencer founded Umbrella. The same distinctive red and white design, identical in every meaningful detail. See, it's not coincidence or artistic similarity. It's the exact Umbrella logo, present in a location that should be historically impossible. Miranda's work predates Umbrella by at least 50 years. She was experimenting with the megamycete, the massive fungal intelligence underlying the mold, before Spencer was born. Yet somehow, her research space features a symbol that would later define the corporation responsible for most of the Resident Evil series' horrors. Letters found in the village reveal the connection. A young Spencer visited the village before founding Umbrella. He met Miranda. He observed her research into the megamycete and her attempts to use its mutagenic properties to resurrect her dead daughter Ava. Spencer didn't just study Miranda's work, he was inspired by it, shaped by it, fundamentally changed by understanding what this ancient organism could accomplish. The letters describe how Spencer saw possibilities Miranda herself hadn't fully realized, ways to weaponize what she saw as a tool for resurrection. But the symbol remains unexplained. Did Spencer adopt Miranda's symbol when founding Umbrella? Or did Miranda adopt the symbol after Spencer showed it to her? The timing doesn't work for either explanation. The mural appears to be ancient, created during Miranda's initial research decades before Spencer's visit. Yet the symbol is identical to Umbrella's later logo, not merely similar. Same design, same proportions, same aesthetic. It's not a case of Spencer copying Miranda or Miranda copying Spencer. It's the same symbol existing in both time periods, as though it transcends linear causality. Some theories suggest the symbol has older significance that both Spencer and Miranda independently discovered, that it represents something about viral or fungal mutation that different researchers recognized across time periods. This would position Umbrella's logo as less a corporate brand and more a recognition of deeper principles about biological transformation. But this raises further questions about what those principles are and why this specific geometric design represents them. The megamycete itself complicates analysis. This organism is approximately 400 years old, contains the consciousness and memories of everyone it's infected over centuries, and demonstrates capabilities that blur the line between biological organism and supernatural entity. It doesn't just mutate hosts, it preserves their consciousness, allows communication across time and space, creates shared experiences between people separated by centuries. When Rose enters the Megamycete's consciousness in the shadows of Rose DLC, she encounters her father Ethan despite his death, preserved somehow within the fungal network's collective memory. Miranda's attempts to resurrect Eva using the Megamycete failed repeatedly. She could create physical copies of her daughter using mold-infected hosts, but consciousness never transferred correctly. The created beings looked like Eva, sounded like Eva, but lacked whatever essential quality made them actually be Eva. Miranda spent decades trying to solve this problem, experimenting on villagers, creating the Four Lords through different applications of mold infection, searching for a perfect vessel that might finally succeed where all previous attempts failed. Spencer witnessed this research and apparently misunderstood or deliberately reinterpreted it. Where Miranda sought resurrection, Spencer saw the potential for controlled evolution. Where she wanted to recreate one specific person, he imagined creating superior humans through managed mutation. The progenitor virus research that founded Umbrella's bioweapon programs came from Spencer applying Miranda's techniques to different goals. He weaponized what she'd created for love, but the symbol suggests deeper connection than simple inspiration. The fact that it appears in both contexts, ancient and modern, resurrection and bioweapon, implies something fundamental about the relationship between Miranda's work and Umbrella's mission. Perhaps Spencer didn't just copy Miranda's research. Perhaps he was completing something she'd started, continuing work toward an endpoint she hadn't recognized. Or perhaps Miranda herself had connections to forces or organizations that existed before Umbrella and would continue after it, and Spencer unknowingly joined a longer tradition of attempting to control human evolution through biological means. The Four Lords and Village each represent different approaches to mold infection, different ways the fungal organism can transform human biology. Lady Dimitrescu gained regenerative abilities and superhuman strength. Donna Beneviento developed psychotropic abilities and plant-like growths. Salvatore Moreau mutated into an aquatic form. Carl Heisenberg gained magnetic powers and mechanical affinity. These diverse outcomes from a single source organism mirror how the progenitor virus produced multiple viral strains with different effects. Miranda's experiments parallel Umbrella's bioweapon research programs across decades. This suggests Spencer didn't just steal Miranda's ideas, he replicated her methodology across different biological vectors. Where she used the megamycete, he used progenitor. Where she sought resurrection, he sought weaponization. But the fundamental approach remained the same: introduce a mutagenic organism, observe the results, select for useful traits, attempt to control and refine the transformations. Spencer's entire career at Umbrella was basically performing Miranda's research at massive scale with different goals. The post-credit scene in Village's Shadows of Rose DLC introduces another mystery. A figure approaches Rose and her BSAA handler, mentioning Ethan in terms that suggest ongoing interest in the Winters family. The identity remains concealed, but the encounter implies that forces larger than any one organization continue manipulating events involving the megamycete, the mold, and individuals who've been affected by them. Rose represents something unprecedented, a human born with mold abilities, potentially the first truly successful fusion of fungal intelligence and human consciousness. If Miranda's goal was creating a perfect vessel for consciousness transfer, Rose might be the accidental success that decades of deliberate experimentation couldn't achieve, not through forced infection and transformation, but through natural birth from a father who'd been infected and a mother who'd carried mold in her system. Rose exists as what Miranda wanted Ava to be, fully human yet possessing megamycete capabilities, conscious and individual yet connected to the fungal network. This positions Village not as a departure from Resident Evil's main narrative, but as a revelation of its foundations. The Umbrella Corporation, the viral research, the bioweapon programs, all of it traces back to a grieving mother trying to resurrect her daughter in a remote village using a fungal organism that predates recorded history. Spencer saw her work and misunderstood it as a blueprint for controlled evolution rather than desperate resurrection. That misunderstanding spawned Umbrella, which spawned the viral outbreaks, which created the world of Resident Evil, but the symbol remains unexplained. Why does Umbrella's logo appear in Miranda's ancient laboratory? What does it represent beyond corporate branding? Is it a warning, a recognition, a mark of membership in something older than Umbrella itself? The files don't answer. Village presents the connection, then refuses to explain it, leaving players with certainty that something profound links Miranda's research to Spencer's corporation, but no details about what that something actually is. The mystery suggests that Resident Evil's story runs deeper than corporate conspiracy and bioweapon proliferation, that beneath all the viruses and parasites and fungal infections runs a single continuous thread connecting Miranda's village to Umbrella's laboratories, to whatever force manipulates events in Rose's present day. The symbol marks that thread, but doesn't explain it. It just sits there in ancient stone, identical to a modern corporate logo, suggesting that what we think we understand about Resident Evil's timeline and causality might be entirely wrong. Maybe Spencer didn't start anything. Maybe he just continued work that had been ongoing for centuries, added his chapter to a longer story about humans trying to overcome death through biological transformation. And maybe that story isn't finished. Maybe Rose represents its next phase, and whoever approached her at the end of Shadows of Rose understands connections that players don't yet see. The umbrella symbol in Village Miranda is less a mystery and more a question mark carved into the series' foundation. A reminder that answers only generate more questions, that connections extend farther back than anyone realizes, and that some symbols transcend the organizations that use them to represent truths those organizations never fully understood. The memory Natalia carries. Natalia Corda was 10 years old when Alex Wesker chose her as a vessel. The child survived the Terra Grigia panic, the bioterror incident that killed her parents and thousands of others. Trauma reshaped her psychology in ways that made her perception fundamentally different from normal children. She developed the ability to sense things others couldn't: fear, infection, danger. She described these perceptions as seeing dark presences around people, shadows that indicated something wrong. This unusual perception made her valuable to certain organizations. It also made her the perfect host for Alex Wesker's consciousness. Alex was one of the Wesker children, part of Project W that produced Albert Wesker and a dozen other candidates engineered by Spencer to be superhuman. Most died. Albert became Spencer's monster and betrayed him. Alex survived through obsession with immortality, retreating to a remote island and conducting experiments designed to achieve consciousness transfer, placing her mind into a new body to escape mortality. She studied various techniques, She selected candidates based on psychological profiles that suggested compatibility. She narrowed her search to children, specifically children whose trauma had reshaped their minds in ways that might accept foreign consciousness. Natalia matched all criteria, young enough that her identity hadn't fully solidified, traumatized enough that her mind showed plasticity Alex could exploit, perceptive enough to possess unique abilities that made the transfer worthwhile. Alex kidnapped her, brought her to the island facility, and performed the consciousness transfer. The procedure should have placed Alex's mind completely into Natalia's body, overriding the child's consciousness entirely. Instead, something unexpected occurred. The transfer partially succeeded. Alex's consciousness entered Natalia, integrated into her neural structure, established itself as a presence within the child's mind. But Natalia's consciousness didn't disappear. Both minds existed simultaneously in the same body. Alex as a dormant presence, Natalia still in control. The child retained her personality, her memories, her sense of self, but she now shared cognitive space with Albert Wesker's sister, and neither consciousness knew when or if the balance might shift. Alex's physical body, mortally wounded in the transfer process, mutated and became the monstrous final boss of Resident Evil, Revelations 2. The creature hunted Natalia with single-minded fury, driven by Alex's original consciousness that still inhabited the failing biological form. That consciousness wanted the child dead, wanted to eliminate any possibility of the transfer reversing, wanted to ensure Alex's new existence in Natalia's body. Barry Burton killed the monster. Natalia survived. The threat seemed ended, but the good ending's post-credits scene suggested otherwise. Natalia sits reading in her new home with Barry's family 6 months after the island incident. She's adjusting well, displaying no signs of trauma or unusual behavior. She seems like a normal little girl who survived a terrible experience and found a loving family to help her recover. Then, the camera shows what she's reading. Newspapers about events from Resident Evil 6, incidents that occurred after she left the island. And she's smiling while reading them, not a child's innocent smile, but something else. Something that suggests she finds entertainment in global bioterror catastrophe. The books visible in the scene include Franz Kafka's Aphorisms. Alex Wesker loved Kafka's work, quoted from it, found inspiration in his philosophical musings about humanity and consciousness. Natalia shouldn't know Kafka. A 10-year-old trauma survivor adopted by Barry Burton wouldn't be reading existential philosophy and smiling over reports of bioweapon incidents. But Alex would. And this moment suggests that 6 months after the transfer, Alex's consciousness is beginning to surface, beginning to influence the child's behavior and interests, beginning to emerge from dormancy into active control. The implications are horrifying. Natalia doesn't know she shares her mind with Albert Wesker's sister. She doesn't understand that the consciousness transfer succeeded in ways Alex didn't anticipate, creating a time-delayed takeover rather than immediate replacement. She's living with Barry's family, being raised as his adopted daughter, developing relationships and routines and a sense of safety. Meanwhile, Alex's consciousness grows stronger, asserts itself more prominently, waits for the moment when the balance shifts completely and Natalia's consciousness can be eliminated from within. Barry doesn't know. His daughter Moira doesn't know. The BSAA doesn't know. Everyone involved believes the threat ended when the monster died. They see Natalia as a victim who needs protection and support, not realizing she carries the consciousness of someone who orchestrated the entire island incident, who intended to achieve immortality through this exact method, who's currently lying dormant in a child's mind waiting to take full control. The timing remains uncertain. Will Alex's consciousness fully emerge in months, years, decades? Does she need to wait until Natalia's brain develops further before attempting complete control? Or is she already in control, already steering Natalia's choices while letting the child believe she's acting independently? The scene shows Natalia smiling at reports of bioterror attacks. Did she choose to read those articles, or did Alex's influence guide her to them? Does Natalia understand why she finds them interesting, or does she mistake Alex's interest for her own developing personality? This mystery extends beyond Natalia herself to questions about consciousness and identity. If both minds exist simultaneously, who is Natalia actually? Is she the child host with an unwanted passenger, or has she already become a fusion of both consciousnesses, something new that's neither purely Natalia nor purely Alex? When Alex's consciousness eventually takes full control, if it does, will that constitute murder of the child or evolution of the hybrid consciousness they've become? Project W was designed to create superhuman individuals. Albert Wesker achieved this through viral enhancement and betrayal. Alex Wesker pursued consciousness transfer and achieved something potentially more dangerous, a superhuman consciousness that could survive indefinitely by moving between bodies, that could accumulate experience and knowledge across multiple lifetimes, that could become something unprecedented in human history. If Alex successfully takes control of Natalia, she'll possess all of Natalia's memories and abilities, plus her own decades of research and planning. She'll be young again, with a full lifetime ahead to pursue whatever goals she considers worthy, and those goals remain unknown. Alex's motivations during Revelations 2 focused on achieving immortality and proving herself superior to her brother Albert. But what does she want after immortality is achieved? What does an effectively immortal Wesker sibling do with unlimited time and the resources she's accumulated? She has knowledge of Umbrella's research, connections to bioweapon networks, understanding of consciousness transfer that no one else possesses. She's positioned to become a threat far more enduring than Albert ever was because she can't be killed. She can just transfer to new hosts whenever necessary. The mystery of Natalia isn't whether Alex will take control. The post-credits scene strongly suggests that process has already begun. The mystery is when it will complete, whether anyone will realize before it's too late, and what Alex Wesker actually plans to do with her second chance at life. Barry thinks he's raising a daughter. He's actually harboring one of the most dangerous minds in the Resident Evil universe, someone who's literally waiting inside his adopted child's consciousness for the right moment to take full control. No subsequent games have addressed this plotline. Natalia doesn't appear in later entries. Barry's family isn't mentioned in current storylines. The dangling thread remains unresolved, suggesting either that Capcom hasn't decided what to do with Alex's consciousness transfer, or that they're saving this revelation for a future game where Alex emerges from dormancy and reminds everyone that the Wesker bloodline isn't finished causing catastrophes. For now, Natalia Corda lives with Barry Burton somewhere in North America, attending school and living a relatively normal life. She reads books that interest her, smiles at news articles, develops relationships with her adoptive family, and inside her mind, Alex Wesker waits, patient, growing stronger, confident that time favors her because she has all the time in the world, and everyone else thinks the threat ended 6 months ago on that island. The monster died, the consciousness survived, and nobody knows to look for threats that hide in the minds of 10-year-old girls who seem perfectly normal until the moment they're not. The progenitor's true origins. Before the T virus, before Umbrella, before Spencer's mansion and Marcus's training facility, and all the bioweapon programs that defined Resident Evil, there was Progenitor, the original virus, the source from which everything else derived. In 1966, Oswell Spencer, James Marcus, and Edward Ashford traveled to West Africa following ancient texts that described a flower with extraordinary properties. They found the stairway of the sun, a flower that grew in a specific region, infected by a unique retrovirus that caused mutations in anything that consumed it. The local Ndapaya tribe had discovered it centuries earlier, worshipped it as sacred, understood that it could transform humans into something beyond human. The three scientists collected samples. They isolated the virus. They began research into its properties and potential applications. Edward Ashford died from accidental infection during early experiments, his body unable to process the viral load. Spencer and Marcus continued the work, founding Umbrella Corporation as a front for viral research that would violate every international law about biological weapons development. The T virus emerged from attempts to weaponize Progenitor by reducing its lethality while maintaining its mutagenic properties. Decades of research, thousands of test subjects, and countless variations all traced back to that flower in West Africa. But the Progenitor virus itself remained mysterious. It wasn't engineered. It existed in nature, specifically in that one flower species in that one region. No explanation existed for how a retrovirus with such sophisticated properties, the ability to rewrite human DNA, create superhuman abilities in compatible hosts, cause controlled mutations rather than simple cellular breakdown, could evolve naturally. Viruses don't typically develop capabilities that allow humans to become superhumanly strong, regenerate from mortal wounds, or develop entirely new biological structures. Natural selection doesn't favor viruses that transform their hosts into monsters instead of simply killing them and spreading to new hosts. The Ndapaya tribe's history with the flower suggested it had existed for centuries at minimum. Their religious texts described rituals involving consumption of the flower, transformation of chosen individuals into guardians with enhanced abilities, a tradition of creating protectors through controlled infection. This implied that ancient people had successfully achieved what Spencer and Marcus spent decades trying to replicate: controlled progenitor infection that enhanced rather than destroyed the host. The tribe understood something about the virus that modern science struggled to rediscover. Resident Evil 5 revealed that the Ndapaya worshipped the flower as a gift from the sun, believed it connected them to divine forces, and used it to create enhanced warriors who could defend the tribe from threats. These enhanced individuals, if the texts are accurate, lived for extended periods, demonstrated superhuman capabilities, and maintained their consciousness despite viral infection. This sounds suspiciously like what Spencer was trying to achieve through Project W, and what Albert Wesker actually became after his own progenitor infection. The question becomes, if an ancient African tribe successfully achieved controlled progenitor enhancement centuries before modern genetic engineering existed, what did they know that Spencer never learned? The Ndapaya had no laboratories, no advanced equipment, no theoretical framework of viral genetics. Yet they apparently succeeded where Umbrella's researchers consistently failed. They created stable superhuman hosts who didn't degenerate into monsters or die from cellular breakdown. Some theories suggest the flower itself wasn't naturally occurring, that something created or modified it, possibly the same force or intelligence that created the megamycete in Eastern Europe. This would explain why progenitor has properties inconsistent with natural evolution. It was designed, engineered by something with capabilities beyond human science. The stairway of the sun might be less an evolutionary accident and more an artifact, a biological tool left by something that understood genetic manipulation at levels humanity still can't match. This theory gains support from how specific progenitors' requirements are. It infects a particular flower species in a particular region. Compatible human hosts are extraordinarily rare. Spencer's Project W tested dozens of children, and only Albert Wesker successfully integrated the virus without dying or degenerating. The virus seems designed to be selective, to only successfully enhance individuals who meet very specific genetic criteria. Natural viruses aren't usually that picky. They evolve to maximize spread and survival, which means infecting as many hosts as possible. Progenitor does the opposite. It kills most hosts and only enhances a tiny minority. The megamycete connection strengthens this theory. Village revealed that the fungal intelligence existed for 400 years minimum, possibly longer. It demonstrated capabilities that blur the line between biological organism and something else, preserving consciousness across centuries, enabling communication between distant individuals, creating shared experience networks. If something created the megamycete, it might have also created progenitor. Both organisms share unusual properties: selective enhancement of rare, compatible hosts, preservation of consciousness in some cases, transformation of biology in ways that transcend normal mutation. Spencer's visit to Miranda's village before founding Umbrella suggests he encountered both sources of mutagenic power: fungal in Eastern Europe, viral in West Africa. Both had ancient origins, indigenous populations that worshiped them, histories of creating enhanced individuals through controlled infection. Spencer might have recognized these as two implementations of the same underlying principle, different biological vectors for achieving the same goal of directed human evolution. This would explain why he pursued viral research so aggressively, despite the fungal organism clearly existing and having similar properties. He wasn't choosing between them so much as recognizing that both were pieces of something larger. But this raises the ultimate question: who or what created these mutagenic organisms, and why? If progenitor and the megamycete are both artificial, both designed to selectively enhance humans under specific conditions, both positioned in remote locations where ancient peoples could discover and utilize them, then something wanted humanity to find these tools. Something wanted specific humans to become superhuman through biological transformation. Something has been influencing human evolution for centuries through carefully placed mutagenic organisms. The Indipaya texts might hold clues. They describe the stairway of the sun as a gift from above, something that descended rather than evolved. They position it as intentionally placed for human benefit, a tool provided by forces beyond human understanding. If this is metaphor, it's oddly specific metaphor. If it's literal description, then progenitor was deliberately introduced to Earth by something capable of creating viruses with properties beyond natural evolution. This suggests that everything in Resident Evil, every viral outbreak, every bioweapon program, every catastrophe from 1998 onward stems from humanity discovering tools we were never supposed to find or weren't ready to use responsibly. Spencer found progenitor. Miranda found the megamycete. Both spent their lives trying to unlock capabilities these organisms possessed, trying to replicate what ancient peoples had apparently achieved through ritual and tradition rather than scientific method. Both failed to fully control what they'd discovered, creating monsters instead of enhanced humans, causing catastrophes instead of directed evolution. The real horror might be that these failures were predictable, that whatever created progenitor and the megamycete understood that modern humans would misuse them, would weaponize them, would cause exactly the kind of global catastrophe that Resident Evil depicts. Perhaps the organisms weren't left for humanity to find. Perhaps they were forgotten, abandoned, meant to remain hidden. And Spencer and Miranda's discoveries represented not brilliant scientific achievement, but catastrophic mistakes, finding tools that were deliberately concealed because the entities that created them knew humanity would destroy itself with them. Or perhaps the catastrophes were the point. Perhaps whatever created these organisms wanted to observe what humanity would do with directed evolutionary power. The megamycete preserves consciousness, creates records of everyone it infects, maintains information across centuries. It's not just a mutagenic organism, it's a recording device, a living archive of human experience. Progenitor creates specific, measurable outcomes when humans with certain genetic profiles are infected. It's not just transforming them, it's running experiments, testing hereditary lines, determining which human genetic combinations produce which results. From this perspective, Spencer and Marcus weren't discovering progenitor. They were being discovered by it. Their research served purposes beyond human understanding, generating data about human genetic variability and response to extreme mutagenic pressure. Every umbrella experiment, every viral strain, every monster created was information, data points, in a longer experiment about human adaptation and evolution. The scientists thought they were studying the virus. The virus might have been studying them. This would explain why progenitor exists at all, why it has properties inconsistent with natural evolution, why it's so selective about compatible hosts. It was designed to be selective, to only successfully enhance humans who meet specific criteria, because the enhancement was never the point. The point was determining which humans could be enhanced, gathering data about human genetic potential, running species-wide experiments disguised as viral outbreaks. The mystery of progenitor's origins remains officially unsolved. The games provide the discovery story. Spencer and Marcus found a flower in West Africa, but they don't explain where the flower came from, why it existed, who or what engineered the virus it contained. The absence of explanation feels deliberate, like Capcom understands that some mysteries become less effective when solved. The horror of progenitor isn't what it does. It's not knowing where it came from or why something would create a virus with those specific capabilities and leave it where humans would eventually find it. Every bioweapon in Resident Evil traces back to that flower. Every outbreak, every mutation, every catastrophe stems from Spencer's decision to collect samples in 1966. One flower in West Africa became the T virus, the G virus, the Las Plagas modifications, countless other strains and variants. One discovery cascaded into decades of horrors because humans found a tool they didn't understand and immediately weaponized it without asking who made it or why it existed. The stairway of the sun still grows in West Africa. The texts say it ascends toward the sun, reaches for light, grows in specific soil under specific conditions. The Ndapaya tribe still exists, still maintains their traditions, still remembers what their ancestors knew about the flower. Nobody asks them. Nobody studies their historical knowledge of controlled enhancement. Spencer took the flower and ignored the people who'd successfully used it for centuries. He assumed modern science would surpass traditional knowledge. He was wrong. The Indipaya achieved what Umbrella never could, and the secret died with them because Spencer thought he didn't need it. Somewhere in West Africa, the stairway of the sun still blooms, infected with progenitor virus, waiting for someone else to find it, waiting for the next person who thinks they can control evolution through viral engineering, waiting to transform another brilliant mind into another source of catastrophe. The flower doesn't care who finds it, it just does what it was designed to do: offer power to humans while withholding understanding, provide capabilities beyond human achievement while ensuring those capabilities destroy whoever wields them, serve as a test that humanity continues failing because we keep choosing power over wisdom, weapons over comprehension, control over harmony, and whatever created the stairway of the sun, whatever intelligent engineered progenitor, and positioned it where humans would find it, that entity watches, maybe through the Megamycetes consciousness network, maybe through mechanisms humanity hasn't discovered yet. It watches what we do with the tools it provided, records our choices, documents our failures. It's been watching since the Endopia first found the flower centuries ago. It watched Spencer and Marcus collect samples in 1966. It watched Umbrella create monsters for 30 years. It watched Raccoon City burn. And it's still watching, waiting to see what humanity does next with evolutionary power we don't understand and can't control. Waiting to see if we'll learn or just keep making bigger weapons from tools that were never meant to be weapons at all. The mystery of progenitor isn't where it came from. The mystery is why whoever created it thought we deserved to have it, and whether that entity is disappointed or satisfied that we've used it exactly as catastrophically as they apparently expected we would. The voices in the fog. The fog in Silent Hill isn't empty. Players know this. The monsters hide in it, using reduced visibility to approach unseen. But sometimes, if you listen carefully, there are sounds that aren't monsters, voices, words that might be screams or might be something else, whispers that seem to come from specific directions until you turn and realize the sound is everywhere or nowhere or inside your own head. Resident Evil has fog too. The Arklay Mountains, the European village in RE8, parts of Raccoon City where weather and smoke created low visibility. But Resident Evil's fog has always been different from Silent Hill's. It conceals but doesn't speak. It reduces visibility but doesn't whisper. It's environmental hazard rather than atmospheric presence, a technical solution to hardware limitations that became aesthetic choice in later games. Except sometimes it's more than that. Players report experiences that don't match documented gameplay, sounds in the fog that aren't in the audio files, voices speaking words that don't appear in any script or subtitle, fleeting images of figures that aren't any cataloged enemy type. These reports cluster around specific locations and specific games, consistent enough to suggest something more than isolated glitches or pareidolia. The Arklay Forest is the most common setting. Players walking through fog-heavy sections of the original Resident Evil and its remake describe hearing sounds that seem like words but can't be clearly understood. Crying that sounds almost like Lisa Trevor but comes from directions she isn't located. Whispers in English that don't match any character dialogue. One player transcribed what they heard as, "He kept them in the walls," repeated 3 times before the audio normalized. Nobody else in that area reports hearing that phrase. The audio files contain nothing matching it. RE2's sewers produce similar reports. Players describe hearing what sounds like children crying in the fog-filled sections where visibility drops significantly. The Raccoon City orphanage connects to the sewers, and William Birkin conducted experiments on orphan children, but no child enemies exist in the sewers. No scripted audio of children appears in that section's files. Yet multiple players across different versions of the game report hearing crying sounds that seem too distinct to dismiss as ambient noise or audio artifacts. The village in RE8 has the most concentrated reports. The fog there is thick and present throughout the early sections. Players describe hearing voices speaking Romanian, which makes sense given the setting, except the voices aren't coming from NPCs or scripted events. They're ambient, directionless, saying phrases that don't match any dialogue in the game. One player who spoke Romanian transcribed what they heard as, "They're still in the ground," and "the child sees everything." These phrases don't appear in the game script. They're not subtitle options. They're not in the audio files that data miners have extracted and analyzed. The technical explanation is obvious. Audio glitches, pattern recognition creating speech-like sounds from ambient noise, players experiencing pareidolia in atmospheric settings designed to be unsettling. Fog environments use layered audio to create depth and atmosphere. Wind sounds, distant animal calls, structural creaking, all blend together in ways that might occasionally produce patterns our brains interpret as speech. This happens in any game with complex audio design. But the consistency troubles that explanation. Different players in different locations on different hardware report similar experiences. Not identical phrases, but the same type of phenomenon. Voices in the fog that say things related to the location's lore, despite those phrases not existing in the game's files. Lisa Trevor's location produces sounds about keeping them in walls, which matches how George Trevor described hiding in the mansion's hidden spaces. The sewers near the orphanage produce sounds of children despite no children appearing there. The village produces phrases about children in sight in sections where players first encounter the Duke and Donna Beneviento's territory. Some players experimented with recording these sounds. The recordings capture ambient audio, but the voice-like elements sound less distinct in playback than during gameplay. It's as though the phenomenon requires active play to manifest, as though it emerges from the interaction between game audio, player attention, and environmental context rather than existing in the audio files themselves. One player described it as the fog talking through the game's sounds instead of having its own audio track. This might explain why data mining doesn't reveal the sources. If the phenomenon emerges from how layered audio files combine in specific circumstances under specific conditions, it wouldn't exist as a discrete audio file to extract. It would be an emergent property of the audio system itself, unintended results of complex sound design, creating patterns that happen to sound like speech. But what about the content? Why would random audio artifacts consistently produce phrases relevant to their locations? Why would the sewers generate child sounds near the orphanage, the mansion generate hiding-related phrases near Trevor's areas, the village generate site-related phrases near Beneviento's territory? Coincidence can explain individual instances, but the pattern suggests something more structured. One theory is that developers intentionally included these elements as Easter eggs, using techniques that make them difficult to data mine or document. By layering sounds in specific ways that create speech-like patterns under particular circumstances, they could add hidden atmospheric elements that players would experience without being able to prove or document easily. This would explain the consistency and relevance. The effects are intentional, just implemented in ways that resist simple file extraction. But no developer has confirmed this. No interviews discuss intentionally creating phantom voices in fog. No behind-the-scenes documentation mentions techniques for generating speech from ambient audio layers. If this was intentional design, the creators have been remarkably committed to never acknowledging it, which seems unlikely given how game developers usually enjoy discussing clever technical solutions and hidden details. The supernatural explanation feels inappropriate for Resident Evil. This series is science fiction horror, viruses and bioweapons, not ghosts and curses. Fog is water vapor mixed with environmental particulates. It doesn't carry voices of the dead. The people who died in these locations are dead. Their consciousness ended, their physical forms either destroyed or preserved as specimens. There's no mechanism in Resident Evil's established lore for fog to somehow retain impressions of trauma or transmit phrases about historical events. Except the megamycete complicates this. The fungal intelligence in RE8 preserves consciousness and memory. It maintains awareness of everyone it's infected across centuries. It can project experiences and simulate individuals who've died. If the mold can do that, preserve thought, transmit consciousness, create shared experience across space and time, then maybe other organisms or environmental factors could have similar properties at smaller scales. The fog in the Arklay Mountains contains spores and particles from decades of viral contamination. The T-virus was airborne in parts of the mansion and forest. Every organism in the region was infected at some point. When Lisa Trevor died in the mansion explosion, her body, which had absorbed every major viral strain Umbrella developed, was vaporized and became particulate matter that scattered into the environment. What if some fragment of her, some microscopic trace encoded with consciousness through viral infection, survived in the fog? What if what players hear isn't audio glitches, but something preserved in the viral particles themselves? This suggests uncomfortable possibilities about viral consciousness. The established lore treats viruses as biological tools that mutate hosts but don't themselves possess awareness. But the megamycete demonstrates that mutagenic organisms can maintain consciousness and memory. If fungal networks can do it, why not viral networks? What if the T-virus outbreak in Arklay didn't just infect individuals but created a distributed viral consciousness across the contaminated region, maintaining fragmentary impressions of what happened there? The phrases players report, "he kept them in walls," "children crying," references to site and burial, would then be fragments of trauma preserved in viral particles, transmitted through the medium of fog, picked up by players as ambient sound because the game's audio system accidentally creates conditions where these impressions become audible. Not intentional design, not audio glitches, but emergent phenomena from the game accidentally simulating how viral consciousness might actually function. This explanation is absurd. It requires accepting that game designers accidentally created a system that simulates theoretical viral consciousness preservation that doesn't actually exist in reality. It's more reasonable to accept that fog sounds sometimes seem like voices and players are experiencing normal pattern recognition enhanced by atmospheric settings designed to be unsettling. But the reports continue. Each new Resident Evil game with significant fog produces new accounts of players hearing things that aren't in the files, seeing things that don't match any documented content, experiencing phenomena that resist simple technical explanation. The developers don't acknowledge it. Data miners don't find source audio. Players can't reliably reproduce or record it, yet the experiences persist, consistent enough to form patterns but inconsistent enough to resist proof. Maybe the real mystery isn't what causes the voices in the fog, Maybe it's why we hear them at all, what it says about how we interact with horror games, how atmospheric design affects perception, how games can create experiences that exist in the space between programmed content and player interpretation. The fog doesn't need to actually contain voices if it creates conditions where our minds generate them independently. The horror is the same either way, but late at night, playing through the Arklay Mountains or the village, when visibility drops and ambient audio swells, and something in the fog sounds almost like words, in those moments technical explanations feel insufficient. In those moments, the fog does speak, and what it says depends on who's listening, what they know about these places, what trauma has soaked into the ground and might be preserved in particles too small to see but dense enough to carry impressions that players shouldn't be able to hear but somehow do. The voices in the fog remain undocumented, no official audio, no confirmed source. Just reports from players who swear they heard something that wasn't supposed to be there, speaking truths about places where terrible things happened, preserved in mist that shouldn't remember but might, creating horror through absence rather than presence. The horror of sounds that don't exist in files but exist in experience, of voices that nobody programmed but everyone hears, of fog that doesn't speak but whispers anyway when nobody's quite sure they're actually listening. Conclusion: the spaces between answers. The mysteries persist because they must. Resident Evil functions best in the half-light where explanations fail and ambiguity generates horror more effectively than any scripted revelation. The corporate conspiracy is documented. Umbrella developed bioweapons. Governments funded illegal research. Outbreaks killed millions. But beneath that surface narrative, beneath the documented files and official testimonies and wikis cataloging every piece of lore, run deeper currents that resist simple explanation. George Trevor died in his own labyrinth, but his architecture defines the series. Lisa Trevor survived 30 years of experimentation and became the source of discoveries that killed thousands. William Birkin loved his virus more than his family and transformed into exactly the kind of monster he'd spent his career creating. Raccoon City was erased by its own government to bury evidence of complicity. Hunk survives everything and might not be entirely human anymore. The merchant appears where no merchant should be and asks what you're buying. Ada works for someone, but maybe that someone is just herself. The umbrella symbol predates umbrella in a village where consciousness transfers and fungal intelligence blur the line between memory and reality. Alex Wesker waits inside Natalia Corda for the moment when the child realizes she's sharing space with someone else's ambitions. The progenitor virus came from somewhere, and that somewhere has implications nobody wants to examine. The fog speaks in voices that don't exist, but everyone hears. These aren't puzzles to solve. They're spaces where the documented canon ends and interpretation begins, where official lore becomes insufficient and players must construct meaning from incomplete evidence. The horror isn't what we know happened in the Spencer Mansion, or Raccoon City, or the village. The horror is what we can't know, what resists documentation, what operates by rules nobody fully understands. Resident Evil began with a simple premise: biological weapons escape containment, and survivors must navigate the resulting catastrophe. 25 years later, the premise remains, but the context has deepened into layered mysteries where each answer generates 3 new questions. We know how the T virus works. We don't know why progenitor exists. We know Umbrella conducted illegal research. We don't know what Alex Wesker will do with her second chance at life. We know the government destroyed Raccoon City. We don't know what they found in the ruins afterward. The documented horror, zombies and monsters and bioweapon outbreaks, remains effective because it sits atop undocumented horror that players glimpse but never fully see. The creature designs are brilliant. The virus mechanics are well developed. The corporate conspiracy is appropriately cynical. But underneath runs something stranger, something that suggests the documented catastrophes are symptoms of deeper problems nobody's addressing because they haven't identified them yet. Maybe Trevor's architecture was influenced by something in the Arklay Mountains that affected his designs. Maybe Lisa Trevor's consciousness survived in some form that we don't have vocabulary to describe. Maybe Birkin understood something about the G virus that he couldn't articulate before his transformation. Some truth about evolution that remains encoded in his mutations. Maybe Raccoon City's ruins contain evidence of phenomena the government can't explain using conventional scientific frameworks. Maybe Hunk represents a step in human development towards something that transcends individuality. Maybe the merchant exists because certain roles must always be filled regardless of whether individuals are available to fill them. Maybe Ada serves forces that operate outside human organizational structures. Maybe the symbol appears across time because it represents truth that transcends the organizations using it. Maybe Alex's consciousness transfer worked too well and created something unprecedented. Maybe Progenitor was testing us all along. Maybe the fog does remember. Or maybe these are just horror game mysteries that create atmosphere through ambiguity, unresolved plot lines that the developers haven't addressed, loose ends that accumulate across 25 years of franchise history. Maybe the pattern-seeking human brain generates conspiracy where only inconsistent writing exists, finds meaning in random details, constructs elaborate theories from simple oversights. The uncertainty is the point. Horror thrives in spaces where certainty fails. Resident Evil understands this. The documented horrors provide surface-level scares. The undocumented mysteries provide atmospheric dread that persists after the credits roll and the zombies are dead and the save files are completed. They create the feeling that something remains unexplained, that the full truth about these events exceeds what files and wikis can document, that the world of Resident Evil operates by rules partially visible and partially obscured. These are the darkest mysteries because they're the ones that can't be solved through gameplay or file reading or developer interviews. They exist in the gaps between documented facts, in the uncomfortable spaces where lore becomes insufficient. They persist because they must, because resolving them would eliminate the ambiguity that makes them effective, because horror needs mysteries that resist solution to maintain its power over imagination. The Arklay Mountains remain quarantined. The ruins of Raccoon City remain classified. The village has no official designation. These places existed, hosted catastrophes, and disappeared into government secrecy and corporate bankruptcy, and the erasure that follows when acknowledging what happened becomes too complicated. But the mysteries survive in player experiences, in unexplained phenomena, in questions that multiply faster than answers can contain them. You can play every Resident Evil game, read every file, watch every cutscene, and still not know what George Trevor felt in those final moments, or why Lisa Trevor wore those faces, or what William Birkin wanted beyond what he said, or where Ada actually reports, or how Hunk survives, or who the merchant serves, or what the symbol means, or when Alex will emerge, or where Progenitor came from, or what the fog is saying. And that uncertainty, that persistent feeling that the documented horror sits atop undocumented mystery, creates the atmosphere that transforms Resident Evil from games about zombies into explorations of how catastrophe reveals truths too disturbing to fully articulate. The mysteries persist because they're true in ways that documented facts can never be. True to how horror feels, how conspiracy operates, how trauma echoes across places and people, how some questions resist answers because the asking is more important than any response.